everyone. I'm Chris. Normally, I host a podcast called Pixelated Path, and today we have a special live episode with Zach. So, thanks for joining. First of all, Zach, to start off, so every journey has an origin. When did you know that design was your path?
Yeah. I kind of ran from it the earlier part of my life. I actually grew up here in Palo Alto, and my dad was a photographer. He was one of the biggest photographers of all the tech from the 70s all the way to the 90s, and I was always around design and photography, and I saw all the Silicon Valley build up. And like looking back now, it makes perfect sense I'm in design because I used to sit in my room and draw and do logos for hours, but I also saw how hard it was to make a living at that point. And I decided I wasn't going to design. I decided I was going to get a genetics degree and become a lawyer and open a genetic law firm. So I went to UC Davis. And I got really lucky. In my first upper division class I took, I walked into the class and the teacher said, there will be no tests and no papers. You're going to get email addresses and you're going to build web pages. And everybody looked around and they're like, and keep in mind, not to date myself, but it was when Yahoo was still being hosted at Stanford. And I remember building my first HTML page, and it was like, oh, I get it. It's like one of the few times I've had this, maybe one or two times, where I'm able to like actually see the future and go, okay, this is going to be big. Like I just saw it all come together, and so. The next thing I knew, I was getting a cracked version of Photoshop, and I sat in a basement for a summer and just ground out on Photoshop. It was like, this is it, and I never looked back.
Man, there we go. The number of designers that I've talked to that have been doing this for decades now, that got their start with cracked versions of Photoshop, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
If it weren't for pirated Adobe software.
It's 100% true, and the only thing I did pay for is I did manage to get one of the books, like a Photoshop manual, and I just remember I read it every night before I went to bed. Like that was how you learn. I was like, okay, trying to put it all together. What are channels? How do bump maps work? All that stuff. So I pay for it now, though.
Trying to see. Maybe the crowd. I wonder how many people still read books to learn software. I would do the same thing. I think I had a PHP book, and I would walk around college campus in between classes and sit down and teach myself PHP.
Yeah.
But it was a book like that thick.
There's something about I love the tactile. The thing with the digital is it's really hard to find your spots.
Yeah.
But a book you can just open up and you and mark the pages and you write. It's just there's something about having a book in your hand. I actually get the audio book, I get the physical, and then I usually have a digital copy as well. So
that's how they get you.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I want to jump to the year's 2015, and Uber's business is booming, but riders are ecstatic, drivers not so much. Uber brings you in to lead the driver experience. Tell me about what that was like.
Well, that was like a dream come true. I remember getting to Uber. I didn't even think I was going to be able to get there. And I just remember when they made me the offer, I just couldn't believe it. And I remember just the first couple of days and going through the interview process. And I remember going home and telling my wife, everybody gets it. When I talk to people, no one's looking at me like they don't understand what I'm talking about, which sometimes I felt like an alien when I was in previous jobs, and everybody got it. Everybody was like, it was so fast, and everybody was so smart, and that was really inspiring. I think from getting into Uber and how do you build empathy really quickly? One of the nice things we had at the time is, I don't think Uber has this anymore, but we had a fleet of like 9 cars. and everybody on the driver team was expected to drive. And there is no better way to build empathy for your customers than actually putting yourself in their shoes. And I remember the first time I went on a drive, and I was nervous, and like, oh, what do I do? And like trying to do the navigation, and how do I get a ride? And even, sitting for the first time and waiting 5 minutes for that ping to come up. It's very, very hard to design a application or experience that happens in the physical world when you sit behind a desk and you're just looking at it on a screen. And then also when you think about all the different places that application was used, it wasn't just in San Francisco. That app was used everywhere for every driver, and so that was a really good way of building empathy for drivers.
What was your biggest takeaway in terms of maybe like a surprise about the experience that drivers had when you did that?
I think the hustle. I think you build a lot of empathy for, people are grinding. When you're on the road 12 hours a day, it's exhausting. And I think everybody on that team, we all got it, and we all were really trying to advocate for the drivers day in and day out. And I think putting yourself in someone's shoes is the best way to understand how you actually design a better experience. And so we were really focused on. There's a ton of things we can talk about from like a research perspective that we learned, even like how compliments came about, which is we just talked to drivers, and they were, sometimes they got like a text message from, someone would give feedback, and they said, we talked to drivers like, this is the best part of my day is when I get that message from my driver or from my rider. We're like, oh, well, how do we actually make this so that instead of making it like a whole lot of effort to leave a compliment, we just make this like set of compliments, and we make them beautiful and engaging, and so that was one of the nice things that kind of came out of it, is like we were always finding new opportunities to make the experience better, not just like the hard stuff of navigation and pickup, and which are all critical, right? But actually, how do you make it a better overall experience?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that's interesting about what you had to do as a driver for the day is all the time, especially when you join a new company, you sort of know that you want to try using the product. But it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of the user if it's not a product for you. And you can almost fake it without realizing it. Like, you don't really get into the mode of what the user has to do. And I think as a driver, you can't miss that. Like, you can't fake it. You have to do the job for the day. Have you carried that anywhere to any of your other roles at other companies that you've worked at?
Absolutely. I think the need to actually use the product, it's sometimes shocking. You walk into a company and they have a product you think is, people are using it everywhere, and yet they don't use the product enough themselves. Mm-hmm. Or they use the product in a very specific way, and they think about it, it's like, well, this is how we use it internally, and it should be used that way everywhere. But when you build products, especially ones that are highly flexible, people use them in all different ways. And so starting to understand that, it starts with getting into the product, using it. We did that, Atlassian was one of those where we really have to use the product. And we have they had a very specific viewpoint on it, but you don't make great products unless you're actually using it day in and day out.
I'd love to talk about Atlassian a little bit. So at Atlassian, you literally have the product integrated into the work that you're doing every single day, but in that case, your perspective on it is always going to be different than your end users, so it's really easy to fool yourself, I think, into believing that you are the target customer, because in some ways you are. How do you separate that?
Well, I think first you have to start talking to all the people who are actually talking to the customers. And in this case, we had a research team, but I think there was a moment in time where I think it was a sales engineer, or he was a customer advocate. He'd been at Atlassian for like 10 plus years, and he made a video. I think this is like when we were still using Loom before they'd actually acquired Loom, and he put a Loom video together of, okay, this is actually, I'm a customer. I bought all these products, this suite of products. but I don't know how to make them work together. Why don't they just work together? Like, I just bought a suite of products, they should work together. Here's all the things I have to go through. And it showed this like 25-step process just to get the thing. I got to go here in the settings, and that video went pretty viral, pretty fast. And MCB, or the CEO, was like, okay, we got to change the entire way we're doing things, because this can't, people are buying an experience, and they expect that experience in a box just to work right out of it. How do we fix this? So I think that was like a really good point of inspiration for these fixes can kind of come from anywhere, but you got to be listening, and it shouldn't be so hard that people have to put videos. Like, we should be able to identify those things sooner than sometimes they just show up.
Cool. So while you were at Atlassian, your team went from 50 to like 350, right?
Close to it.
What was the first thing to break with like that kind of scaling?
Well, it was, so when I got there, the job I thought I was taking changed pretty rapidly. All of a sudden, I went from, I thought I was going to be the senior director there, and the next thing I knew, they had me in the full-on design leadership team. My boss was with the CXO at the time, and it's kind of like the fake it till you make it. I don't think I'd managed more than, I mean, I'd managed big projects, but I don't think I'd really managed a team of bigger than 75, maybe even a little less. And it went from like 75 to, okay, you're going to take this other group of 100 plus. And it's interesting. I think between like 75 and 250, it kind of stays the same. And then after 250, it requires a whole nother set of muscles. I think the thing that broke for me, and one of the reasons why my team got bigger was because I actually built an operations team. There was no design operations at Atlassian at the time. And I didn't just build it for myself, or the platform team. I built it for the entire design, the product design group. So there was 2 different groups. And that was really in response to, there's no way I can be across everything. We are not efficient. How do I actually get insight into these things? And so I think that was the place where things broke, and I quickly started moving to like, how do I fix this stuff quickly? And I think it's just, you kind of have to learn, I think luck is when preparedness meets opportunity, and I think getting at that scale was just thrust me into it, and I kind of had to figure it out. And I was like, okay, I'm just ready for this. And I certainly faked it, and I learned, oh God, I made a lot of mistakes, I'm sure. I know I made a lot of mistakes. But I learned a lot too. And I think the other piece was I had great partners, and it's a lot easier to have failures when you have great partners. I have my product partner, my engineering partner. Those are the things, like, find great relationships that you have trust, and you can rely on each other. It makes it a lot easier. When you feel like you're the only design leader, and I've been in that role too, where sometimes you feel like you are the only, there's product and there's eng, and they don't get you. That's a much harder place to operate in, and find those advocates, find those allies quickly, and build those relationships. Because what I've found also is a lot of times the other disciplines feel the same way. It's surprising. It's like design, we always feel like, oh, I'm the odd person out, but it's not necessarily the case.
I think one of the tough lessons is, one of the tough realities of a role like that is you learn the most on some of your biggest mistakes. What's one of the mistakes that you made as the team was scaling that fast that you feel like has sort of stuck with you as you've gone on to lead other teams? Yeah,
moving too fast. I think I came from Uber, and it was like, that was a hard charging culture. And I mean, I survived 5 years in that. I loved it, but it was, you had your fangs out all the time, right? And in a good way a lot of the time, but it could also, because everybody was focused on like, how do you get great customer experiences, but it was also, there was politics, there's all those things. And then I came into Atlassian. Atlassian is a much softer culture, and I felt I had to really adjust myself to that. But I made the mistake of moving too fast and being too confident, like I know exactly what needs to be done. And it took me time to get the team back because there was a little bit of organ rejection. I remember I had been warned about the Sydney culture when my first trip there, and I was talking to one of the design managers, and I was talking about the things that we need to go do, the things I'm seeing, and his question was like, well, what do you know? And I kind of took a step back. I was like, oh, what do I know? That's a great question. But I moved too fast, and I think that probably set me back a bit. I was able to recover from it, but when I went into Snowflake, I was very conscious of not moving quite as fast, really trying to seek first to understand. So I think that's the big lesson I took away.
It's so tough because every team, every company, every culture is so unique. So how do you make sure that your mistakes from the previous one, you don't sort of misapply them to the next company? Maybe Snowflake needed someone to move faster. Maybe they didn't. Like, what did you do going in to sort of calibrate yourself?
I gave myself a timeline, and I broke it down in days. And there's a great book, First 90 Days, which I'd read when I went to Atlassian. I guess I didn't take all the lessons. I guess that's why I got to read books more than once sometimes. So I thought that I think I broke it down in my days, and I think I was just more intentional about really trying to understand before I made moves. And I think knowing that I didn't know it all, I think also going to Snowflake where it was a very, very different environment, and it was a very different type of product that I hadn't, I didn't know data the way I knew like an Uber or a mobile experience. And so there was a lot of learning, and there's still a ton of learning, which is really exciting. But I think because the combination of not knowing the space as well as other places I'd worked, and also just being new, I just took my time. And so maybe it was the right amount of time, I don't know. It felt like it was. It's never as fast. I like to move fast, and so it's never quite, where we are now, I'm still, I wish we were farther ahead, but when I look back, what we've already accomplished in a little more than a year is pretty amazing.
I'm going to play a little game, rapid fire. So I'm going to say a sentence, and I want you to give me your verdict on what you think, and then a one-liner about why. Cool? Okay. Sketching on paper is dead.
I think that's false. I love sketching on paper. I mean, I'll take whatever's available to you at that time, use it. The reason I like sketching on paper, ideas are cheap. I think in this world where everything is so high fidelity, everybody wants to make it all perfect, and they like to spend more time. No, just like get the idea out. That's the whole. That's really what the focus is about. So, yeah, I love sketching on paper. It'll never go away from me.
Cool. Next one I hear a lot about. I was reading a whole thread on it this morning. Junior roles are disappearing.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think we are seeing a consolidation in the industry. I think we're seeing a consolidation for a few reasons. The first is there was, back in COVID days, there was all of a sudden there was a massive hiring that went on, and we saw a lot of people get hired. And I talked to a lot of these people that were in these companies, and they weren't really working on a lot of stuff. And so now we have a lot more people. There's a bit of a consolidation. And so I do think some of those roles are going away, but I don't think junior designer. We're always going to need designers, even in the world of AI. And I'm trying to figure that out. I think everybody in this room, we're all trying to figure out what is the next thing. What is AI really going to mean? What does it mean for designers? What does it mean for everybody? And it's interesting too, because if you talk to anyone, it's their discipline's the one that's not going to be affected, right? Like everybody else is. Anyway, so yeah, I do think there's some consolidation, but I think there's a lot of things people can do to make sure that they're still going to be relevant as a designer.
Cool. Last hot take. Remote work kills collaboration.
I think being fully remote is really hard. One of the reasons I left Atlassian is Atlassian was fully remote. I had teams all across the world. I was probably doing 15, 16-hour days on Zoom, and it saps you. And I think I don't think you can't substitute getting people in a room. And even Atlassian advocates for this. Hey, we're going to be remote, but when it's time to bring people together to work together, we do it in person. And when you do that, you can get really great results. But I think this fully remote thing, at least for myself, maybe some people are fine with it, but I find it difficult.
Cool. Last question for you to close this out. Looking back, what would you say is the biggest risk that you've taken in your career that you felt like it's paid off?
I remember when I left this startup, and I was working design and product, and I decided to take a kind of a step down. It was a product role at a mobile consultancy, and this is right around maybe a year or two after the iPhone, the Apple Store had launched, the App Store had launched, and I took it for a very specific reason, which is like I really believe in getting my hands dirty, and I don't think you can understand something unless you get your hands dirty, and I got into it, and I was doing product management, and I was trying to build design strategy and trying to help people work through what it means to be mobile, and like what is mobile strategy? We just need an app. Like, this is the days where people are still like, we just need an app. We don't know why, but that's what everybody does. But how it paid off is I would not have gotten Uber if I had not gotten that experience. Because when I walked into the Uber interview, I knew mobile. I knew it hands down. I remember walking out of the interview, I nailed that. And I would not have been able to do that if I hadn't gotten that experience. And I knew that was going to pay off. I knew it was a risk. I knew it was a step down, but I knew it was going to pay off, and it has continued to pay off for me, because like getting Uber has led to Atlassian, which has led to Snowflake, and it's just been, I wish I could say it planned it out exactly like that, but I've been, very, very lucky with the opportunities that I've come about. But I think it really started there.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and having a quick chat with me. Just to recap some of the things that we've talked about and some key takeaways, I think taking risks that you believe in can pay off. I think building empathy as a designer and forcing yourself to be put into your user's shoes, to be able to understand what they go through so that you can actually build the product. Coming in a new organization and taking a minute and taking a beat to just look around and understand the people around you so that you take the right approach, I think are all excellent. Anything else that you want to close out on?
I mean, we're hiring at Snowflake. We're hiring researchers and we're hiring designers, and we're building a really awesome team. And I'm having a great time doing it.
Cool, fantastic. Thanks so much, Zack.
Yeah, thank you for having me.